With the first pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, the Las Vegas Raiders select Fernando Mendoza, quarterback, Indiana.
The words echoed through the cavernous auditorium in Las Vegas, instantly transforming an impossible childhood fantasy into concrete reality. For a young athlete, there is no greater validation than walking across that brightly lit stage, holding up a jersey, and knowing you are the single most coveted football player on the planet. The flashbulbs erupted, painting the room in blinding white light as Mendoza stepped up to the microphone. "I'm really excited to meet everyone in the silver and black organization Raider Nation," Mendoza beamed, his voice remarkably steady despite the chaotic joy surrounding him. "I mean, what a better situation to walk into. I think all the stars are aligning here, and I'm just very blessed to be in this position."
He was ranked the 2,149th player coming out of high school.
That was a true ranking. That was terrible.
But a few years later, after many obstacles, setbacks, and incredible speeches,
I remember going 98 yards, my boys.
Fernando Mendoza made himself the best player in college football.
It was the perfect, polished answer of a franchise quarterback. But beneath the designer suit and the million-dollar smile lay a profound, quiet disbelief. Just a few short years ago, this moment did not exist in any rational universe. In fact, there was a dark, isolated period when Fernando Mendoza genuinely debated quitting the sport altogether, plagued by the very real, very heavy doubt that he simply wasn't good enough to step onto a college field. If you looked at the national recruiting boards in 2022, Fernando Mendoza was essentially a ghost. He wasn't just omitted from the top overall prospect lists. Even within his own position group, he was a statistical afterthought. He sat buried somewhere between 134th and 140th among quarterbacks in the country. To be ranked 140th at your position means you are invisible to major college programs. The deck was heavily stacked against him from the start. He was a late bloomer, lacking the prototypical height, sheer mass, and raw arm strength that scouts salivate over early in a high school career. Worse, his crucial developmental years collided violently with the COVID-19 pandemic. Spring and summer recruiting camps, the absolute lifeblood for unranked, undersized prospects trying to get noticed, were completely shut down. College coaches couldn't travel to see him throw, and whether his high school team would even be allowed to have a season was a constant looming question mark. Without the luxury of betting his entire future on his physical talents, Mendoza channeled his relentless work ethic into the one thing he could control: his mind and his community. Academic excellence. He carried an elite 4.86 GPA, maxing out his schedule with 12 AP classes. Leadership. He served as his class vice president. Community impact. He was the campus ministry president, organizing local humanitarian efforts. His brilliance in the classroom earned him a scholarship offer from Yale University. For most families, an Ivy League offer is the ultimate prize. But for Mendoza, while deeply honored, it felt like a concession prize to the big-time Power 5 college football dream he desperately harbored. When he showed up to the field and was told he would be the fourth-string quarterback, essentially a glorified practice arm, he didn't complain. He leaned on the unwavering support of his mother, who constantly grounded him when the doubt crept in. "If you want to be a quarterback," she told him firmly, "you stick to being a quarterback." He adopted that mentality early. Even as a middle schooler, after scrambling for a modest touchdown and being interviewed by a local camera crew, a young Fernando deflected all praise. "It just takes hard work and determination. I think the whole team helped. The defense did amazing. It was more of a team effort." That exact humility and quiet confidence became the armor he wore through every level of football. He was willing to wait in the shadows. As National Signing Day approached, Mendoza was mentally preparing to pack his bags for New Haven. But college football is a game of chaotic dominoes. Out on the West Coast, the University of California, Berkeley, Cal, suffered a disaster. Their prized quarterback recruit flipped to UCLA at the 11th hour. Scrambling in a panic for a replacement, the Cal coaching staff flew out, watched Mendoza throw a few passes, put him through a frantic whiteboard IQ test, and offered him on the spot. He had zero prior contact with the West Coast program, but it was his shot. Arriving at Cal, however, was a harsh reality check. He redshirted his first year, spending the season shivering on the sidelines. The following fall, he found himself locked in a grueling, uneven three-way quarterback battle. In the modern era of the transfer portal and massive NIL, name, image, likeness deals, Cal had brought in two highly touted, well-paid transfer quarterbacks. The program had a vested financial and optics interest in making those transfers succeed. Mendoza was relegated to the third string. For 99% of college athletes, this is where the story ends. No reps in practice means no film. No film means no opportunities. And no opportunities means no development. But Mendoza refused to let his career stall out in a Berkeley locker room. Recognizing he was a raw prospect with massive NFL ambitions, he realized that if the primary coaching staff wouldn't develop him, he had to find someone who would. He set his sights on Tim Plow, Cal's tight ends coach. Coach Plow agreed to help him, but his days were packed with his actual assigned duties. If Mendoza wanted his time, it would have to be after hours. The midnight meetings, beginning that August, Mendoza started showing up at Coach Plow's office at 9 p.m. every single night. Long after the stadium lights had shut off, the trainers had gone home, and his teammates were asleep. The two would sit in the glow of a desk lamp for 3 hours at a time. They started completely from scratch. They dissected how to read complex defensive rotations. They studied obscure coverages, safety shells, and zero bleed packages. They drilled pocket management and footwork mechanics. Most importantly, Mendoza wasn't just learning how to throw. He was learning how to think like an elite professional quarterback. Coach Plow noted that Mendoza possessed a rare defining trait, a joyful obsession and a rage to master. Slowly, the seeds planted in those quiet midnight sessions began to bloom. The quarterback who wasn't getting physical reps had become the most mentally prepared player in the building. When the highly paid starting quarterbacks inevitably faltered midway through the season, the head coach called Mendoza into his office. "We value preparation," he told him. "Everything you've done for the program, you're starting next week. Prove me right." Having finally achieved his goal of becoming a starting pack, 1-2 quarterback, Mendoza didn't go out to celebrate. At 9 p.m., he walked right back into Coach Plow's office, sat in his usual chair, and asked his usual questions. In his first career start, he threw for a touchdown on a spectacular broken play. Returning to the sidelines, he wasn't just riding the adrenaline high. He was meticulously breaking down the defensive coverages to his coaches on the tablets, proving the midnight meetings had completely rewired his football mind. Despite flashing undeniable brilliance at Cal, the team struggled to close out games. A heartbreaking loss on national television to his hometown Miami Hurricanes, sealed by a late Mendoza interception, highlighted the ceiling he was hitting. Cal was the only school that believed in him when he was a nobody, but Mendoza had to face a hard, uncomfortable truth. If he wanted to develop into a franchise NFL quarterback, he needed a different environment. He entered the transfer portal seeking out an elite offensive-minded staff that prioritized complex quarterback development. He found exactly what he was looking for in Bloomington, Indiana, committing to Indiana University under the guidance of head coach Curt Cignetti and his brilliant offensive staff, Shanahan and Whitmer. At Indiana, everything clicked. The frenetic collegiate game finally slowed down to a crawl for Mendoza. He wasn't just surviving on the field anymore. He was operating it like a seasoned surgeon. He beat defenses purely from the pocket, using elite eye manipulation, terrifying anticipation, and surgical accuracy. His statistical output was staggering. Over 3,500 passing yards, more than 40 touchdowns, and a completion percentage north of 70%. But it wasn't the stats that made him a legend, it was the moments. The defining drive of his career came against Penn State. Down by 4 points, with no timeouts, and only 1:15 left on the clock in a deafening hostile stadium, the game was slipping away. Mendoza took the field and orchestrated a flawless, methodical 2-minute drill. He marched the Hoosiers 73 yards in just 10 plays, capped off by a spectacular, threading-the-needle touchdown pass over the middle into heavy coverage to win the game. It was a masterclass in controlled chaos, and it was the undeniable moment he became the frontrunner for the Heisman Trophy. Mendoza's heroics elevated Indiana. a program historically burdened by having the most losses in Division I history, into an unstoppable juggernaut. They ran the table, finishing as undefeated Big Ten champions, highlighted by a massive, program-defining upset over the #1 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes that sent shockwaves through the sport. His production made the Heisman Trophy a mere formality. Standing on the stage in New York City to accept the most prestigious individual award in American sports, he reflected on the sheer absurdity of his journey. But he didn't use the platform to gloat. Instead, fighting back tears, he looked into the camera and addressed the woman who had anchored him through his darkest days. "Mommy, this is your trophy as much as mine. You've always been my biggest fan. You're my light. You're my why. Your sacrifices, courage, and love, those have been my first playbook. And the playbook I'm going to carry through my entire life." He explained to the world that watching his mother battle multiple sclerosis, MS, daily eliminated any right he had to complain. If he had a bad practice, threw an interception, or faced a grueling 6 a.m. lift, he thought of her battle. She was the eternal fuel behind his rage to master. The fairy tale ending required one final cinematic chapter, the 2026 National Championship game. In a stroke of pure, unscripted, poetic justice, the game was held in Miami, his hometown, against the hometown Miami Hurricanes, the very team that had handed him that bitter, heartbreaking loss back at Cal. In a tense, dramatic climax, the championship came down to one single play. The pocket collapsed instantly. Mendoza took the snap, surveyed the field, and found his receivers blanketed. Trusting his instincts, he tucked the football, evaded the furious pass rush, and scrambled toward the pylon. He leaped, extending the ball over the goal line just as he was hit, scoring the game-winning rushing touchdown. Indiana had done it. The questions that followed Fernando Mendoza when he was an undersized high schooler followed him to Cal, transferred with him to Indiana, and were whispered by scouts in war rooms leading up to the NFL draft. Is he athletic enough? Can he sustain this? Was it a fluke? But those questions have never mattered to him, because he has always answered them the exact same way. From an unranked QB4 begging for midnight film sessions to the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft, his core philosophy never wavered for a single second. If you put a microphone in his face today, as the newly minted franchise quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders, you will hear the exact same echoes of that middle school kid from years ago. It just takes hard work and determination. I think the whole team helped. The defense did amazing. The receivers didn't drop a ball. It was more of a team effort. Fernando Mendoza proved that true greatness isn't always anointed in high school. Sometimes it is built in the shadows of empty film rooms, fueled by an unbreakable familial bond, and carried by a profound, unwavering belief that when the stars finally align, you will be ready.